Dr. Cassi from Vetfolio and the host of Vet2Vet. Today we're talking about research-based strategies for improving client relationships using communication as an important tool, especially when it comes to the really tough conversations. Joining me is Matthew Saloy, Director of Veterinary Economics for the AVMA. Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Cassie. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So can you start off by telling us a little bit about the research that's been done and how it might change our approach to client engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked at length over the years about the challenging conversations that veterinarians and veterinary professionals have with their clients, and we wanted to do something to help. And so we engaged on this course of research to really dig deep into the conversations we have with clients and, more importantly, understand how we can improve those conversations to improve the relationship with the client. And ultimately, it starts with successful communication. So the takeaway here is it's one thing to know what you want to say. It's another to know how to say it in ways that resonate, shift perceptions, drive action. And that's what language strategy is all about.
I love that. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. I feel like I've said that many, many times. And if my husband ever watches this video, his eye might twitch a little bit.
Absolutely. You can add my kids to that too.
So the Language of Veterinary Care initiative is based on 2 years of research with pet owners and veterinarians about language and how it resonates in a variety of different situations. So let's look at this data in terms of how it applies to some specific communication situations. For example, I think one of the most challenging conversations we have in veterinary medicine centers around discussing the cost of care with owners. Are there considerations that we can keep in mind when we're having that conversation just to make it an easier topic to discuss?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good one to start with. And that's one of the more complicated conversations we have with clients. And there's no shortage of complicated and challenging conversations that a veterinary professional is going to face. And I think part of it starts with what you said before, Cassie. It's not what you say, it's what they hear, right? Meaning we may have a very clear idea of the message we want to share, perhaps when it comes to cost of care, and we think we're choosing the best words to convey that message. But the recipient of those words interprets them very differently and ultimately hears a different message than we intended. And that's what this research is aimed at delivering, is understanding how those messages are interpreted. And more importantly, how can we refine that message to make sure that the communication we're trying to get across gets across there. So I think part of it starts with recognizing three realities here with our clients. The first is most pet owners think veterinary care is just for when pets get sick or injured. And secondly, a lot of pet owners get advice from an omni-channel of experts here. And those air quotes aren't unintentional because, first of all, not all advice is good, right? We know that. And also not everyone is an expert. But we do have to recognize the fact that pet owners are seeking guidance from their groomer, from their dog trainer, from the store clerk in the pet store about diet options, right? And then thirdly, we have to recognize that pet owners, they're also money conscious too, just like a lot of us. And big surprise bills, whether they're veterinary bills or other types of bills, can leave lasting impressions. So what's the solution here? What did we get at with this research? The key here is addressing owner concerns in a way that makes veterinary care personal, a strong relationship, and personalized recommendations. And pet owners understand that a strong and trusting relationship enables their veterinarian to provide better care and more customized recommendations in every area of their pet's care, from vaccines, medications, nutrition, and behavior. So by focusing on the experience, the relationship, we can address pet owners' concerns while promoting the importance of veterinary care. So what's the most resonant way to break that down? What's the most resonant way to talk about cost of care with pet owners? It comes down to doing two things. One is address the elephant in the room head on. The second is showing that the cost doesn't have to be prohibitive by providing options. So in order to address that elephant in the room, we've got to confront it head on with our clients. They aren't budgeting for regular care. They aren't aware probably of payment options. And so when the veterinarian demonstrates an understanding about the cost of care and even voices a desire to help them make it affordable, it matters. And then secondly, when we provide options that convey veterinary care isn't a one size fits all, pet owners understand that practices, they need to be economically sustainable. but they also appreciate it when the practice is on their side to explore financial options.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Just speaking from my experience in an exam room of, not dancing around the cost issue, confronting that head on and helping come to a solution that works for that individual client and that individual patient.
Absolutely.
So along those same lines, sometimes we can get client buy-in for this initial visit. Okay, come in and see us. But when it comes to follow-up visits and additional care, maybe not so much. But of course, we can't fix everything in one visit. So what advice does the research give us when it comes to discussing follow-up care with clients?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cassie. What's the most convincing way to encourage pet owners to prioritize routine preventive care, right? And critically, I think this question is also one of how do we best communicate with pet owners who haven't been regular or consistent in getting to the practice for regular veterinary visits? We know from the data that almost 30% of pet owners don't see a veterinarian at least once a year. That is a huge number, and that represents millions of animals not getting proper care. So the first thing to do is this. One, don't make assumptions about what's kept them from regular veterinary care. We understood from the research that comes across as intrusive from clients and almost a sort of a none of your business kind of mentality there. People fundamentally don't like to be reminded that they haven't been getting regular care for their pet, right? No one likes to be reminded of the things that they're supposed to be doing but didn't do, right? No matter how gently you remind people of that. The second thing is, and this is really important from the research, is reassure them that it's easy to pick back up if they haven't been regular, right? So it's easy for clients, pet owners to get on this regular pattern. Well, I haven't gone in a year. I don't know if I want to face the practice and say, I didn't do this, right? So some pet owners have this notion that if they haven't gone in a while, there's no point in going now at all. So it's important to let them know that the veterinarian is still able to meet them wherever they are. Pet owners said in our research that hearing from the veterinary team that they can help catch them up and phrases like get them up to speed, it felt personal, it felt positive, and it felt motivating. And then lastly, the third thing is emphasize that care is important at every stage of the pet's life, right? We see this lumping at the early stages with puppy care and then the later stages during the older ages of the pet. But letting them know that care is important across every stage lets owners know that if they missed a checkup last year or even for a few years, their pet will still benefit from seeing the veterinarian now.
So we're seeing more and more options for veterinary care, from limited service and wellness clinics to teletriage and more. So in that light, I would imagine it can get confusing for pet owners to understand the benefits of building a relationship with their primary veterinarian. What are some of the priority messages from this research that we should keep in mind when we're discussing the importance of that relationship with a veterinarian?
Yeah, that's another great question, and again, goes back to a little bit of what I said earlier around they're getting pet owners, clients, they're getting information from so many different sources. And we want to prioritize the veterinarian, right? So what's the best way to position the role of the veterinarian, especially when it comes to topics that maybe might not be directly related to medical care, right? What's the right language to connect the dots between a strong relationship with the veterinarian and better, more personalized care? So a couple of things. First, set your expertise apart by highlighting your experience, not necessarily your training. In a head-to-head comparison, we found in this research that pet owners agreed that it's experience, not education, that best measures a veterinarian's expertise. In particular, leveraging language that illustrates your experience with different animals and conditions, that resonate with pet owners. What we saw in this research was a pretty clear what didn't work. For example, what didn't work was equating academic credentials with expertise. Throw my PhD out the window, goodbye. Trying to suggest that veterinarians know more and better than others, which very well might be the truth, but trying to communicate that fell flat. And then also highlighting science and research and evidence around why you should do this, even though the evidence was clear, also did not resonate at all. All of these created a sense of distrust, and each of those areas were a turnoff to pet owners. What we found, what came across strongly, is if a veterinarian could leverage his or her experience with providing care to pets and offer personalized recommendations to that particular client, that stood out as the most valuable thing to pet owners, differentiating veterinarians from other sources that might provide just general generic guidance and advice. And I think this aligns with how pet owners see their veterinarian as a source of knowledge among many sources, but ultimately wanting to partner with them, with him or her, to make the final decision on what's right for the pet.
Gosh, I think that really resonates, just sitting on this side and hearing that type of language of, I'm a veterinarian, so I know more. And, kind of the other examples you gave, I'm like, yeah, I could see how those would fall flat. Like they're not sitting well with me either. So I get it.
Yeah, it's no huge surprise there, right? I'm thinking back to my grad school days. The professor that turned me off was the one that said, I went to Harvard or MIT, so you need to listen to me. It was the
Sure.
ones that said, this is where I've been, this is what I've done, and this is what I'm bringing to the classroom. Those were always the most impactful, and I think we can just follow that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes so much sense. And of
Absolutely.
course, with veterinary clinics being so busy these days, I mean, it can be difficult for clients to get an appointment. I'm thinking of a friend that recently messaged me in the middle of the night because he had a cat who wasn't able to urinate and he wasn't sure if he should take him in on emergency. And it wasn't cut and dry. The urgent care was about to close. They didn't have any spots available. The emergency clinic stopped answering their phones because of how busy they were. And, when I got the message at first, you get a message in the middle of the night about veterinary care and you're going, oh, like the eye roll. But really, like I understood the ambiguity. He didn't want to take his cat in on emergency in the middle of the night, only to find out it was a UTI, but he didn't have the medical knowledge to know that this was an emergency. How do we communicate with clients about when to take their pets to the vet in a time when, just taking your pet in isn't quite as easy as it sounds?
Yeah, it's a really tough time right now. And first of all, I hope your friend got the care they needed
He
for his
did. He
cat.
did. Thank you.
Okay, good, good. Those middle of the night calls, they
Oh
always
man,
spell trouble, don't they?
always.
Yeah. I think in general, tackling a message or a communication gap, it starts with empowerment, first of all. Empower both sides of that communication channel to ask questions and gain knowledge from one another. There's a really great example of this strategy of empowerment, which is the Merck vaccine for HPV, Gardasil. And there was a lot of anti-vaccination against this. The science was clear that it would support health in children, lower rates of cancer, but parents were reluctant to give it to their children. And so what language strategy research uncovered here is that uncovering language that would make parents feel more comfortable with the vaccine while also building awareness of the possible effects of the virus were going to be key. Pushing the vaccine on them, saying, if you don't do this, something bad will happen. Again, like we previously discussed, that fell flat. The message needed to be around empowering parents to do what they felt was right for their kids and ultimately leaving them with the decision of what was right or not. Telling parents they have the power to protect their child and backing that up with the information they need to make an informed decision about whether or not to vaccinate. And so by empowering them instead of pushing them, parents felt more comfortable, which meant more children, more teens were getting vaccinated against HPV. So we need to follow that approach here and empower pet owners, not push them to do certain things, but empower them around, these are the options and this is the information here, and we'll let you make the decision of what's right for you and your pet, and we can be a partner in that decision, right? And then the second thing is, sometimes it takes a change in perspective too. So in these communication gaps, it involves being open to having new information or responses to change your perspective, both as the recipient of the message and also as the deliverer of the message, right? If you kick your heels into the sand and don't allow yourself to be moved by new information or new perspectives, that's always going to result in an unsuccessful communication. But allow yourself to be open to new information. That's key.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that we're having this conversation because so much of what you're saying just makes sense. I want to feel empowered to make decisions about myself, my pets, my kids, everything like that. So, that just makes sense, that empowering pet owners to make decisions about their pet, arming them with information and recommendations would get a better response.
Absolutely.
The caseload and staffing stress that many clinics are experiencing right now, we know is very real. It can be hard to keep up, and add to this a client who feels their expectations haven't been met. I mean, it can really lead to like some tense and difficult conversations. What recommendations does the resource within the Language of Veterinary Care initiative have for talking to upset clients?
Yeah, this is an intense time, right, for everyone. None of us have gone through an environment like like this, and I think we're learning, how to cope and adapt along the way. And we didn't touch on this exact topic, and we are gearing up to do additional phases of research, so this may be something we decide to dedicate a focus to. But what we learned from this research is there's a sort of recipe to having a successful communication. And again, it's guided by this research, and it's especially effective in tough situations where there might be an element of conflict. And I call it the three A's, or it's called the three A's of communication: accept, acknowledge, add. And that order is really important. So with the accept part, the starting point is accepting the other person's perspective. Whether or not you believe their perception is true, it's their perception. So if you have an angry client that comes in and says, I've been waiting for 3 hours in the car and no one's called me, right? Like, that may not be true, but you have to at least acknowledge and accept that that's their perception. And if you deny that that's their perception, they're not going to move at all. So accept that. Then the next step is acknowledging your role in that situation. If you're short-staffed, running a full schedule, admitting to where you have contributed to any difficulties there. And this is really essential to establishing trust, and that's foundational to any successful communication. If you don't acknowledge your role in a challenging situation, the other person's not going to trust you. And you build trust when you acknowledge that role that you play. And then finally, when you have done that acceptance and that acknowledgement, you can add. You can add what steps, what actions you're going to take to help address the issue, and what you can do for the client to help aid that situation specifically.
And it sounds like when you say acknowledge your role in the situation, you're not necessarily saying apologize. You're saying, just, it can be just a statement of facts. We are running a full schedule. We're short staffed. We had an emergency. We had to work in several sick patients, whatever it may be, not necessarily making an apology for it, but acknowledging that has contributed to where you are right now. Am I understanding that correctly?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't need to come down to an apology. I think often we feel, some of us feel this inherent need to apologize for everything. And you shouldn't feel sorry for everything, because there's a whole world out there that's outside of your control. It's really just acknowledging what elements you're coping with and making sure that the other side of the conversation is aware of that.
We've talked a little bit about some of these tough conversations, but sometimes we really do get those puppy and kitten visits, and they're fun and they're healthy and they're happy. Does the research suggest anything for making those happy conversations even better?
Yeah, it does, right? And I think you make a great point, Cassie. Not every conversation is a tough one, right? Like, cost of care sure can be, but sometimes it's about making a good conversation a great one. And there are some fun discussions. I bring it back to empowerment. Empower the client to understand the value of veterinary care, encouraging them to develop that trusted relationship with you. And this is important because all of us, we face tons of choices that we have to make each and every day. And if we can make things a little easier for one another, we are all going to feel so much better. So by empowering the client to be excited about veterinary care, seeking you out as a source of wisdom and expertise, and ultimately leveraging less pushing and more pulling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I understand that there are some resources available to help veterinarians deal with these tough situations. And, what we've already mentioned is an unprecedented time in veterinary medicine. So can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, we're so excited. As a researcher, I couldn't be more excited to bring research to life through resources and ways that can help people. So a few things. We have a webpage on avma.org on the language of veterinary care, and encourage everyone to go take a look. There's additional content there. Specifically, we have an ebook, which is available for download for members, where they can look through the broad overview summary of the research. We have a few example of conversations, what not to say, what to say, and why one doesn't work and why the other does work. And it's going to, I think, provide a good resource for not just veterinarians, but all veterinary professionals. We have a hard copy of a flip book as well. So when we're out at meetings and conferences and events, please come to our booth. It's a conversation map, examples of several different challenging, complicated discussions. And again, it's just a resource to help guide professionals in what language to use in these discussions. We are just now launching a learning module on AVMA Axon. It's a guided learning module where you can log in, enter this learning space, and be walked through this research, what it demonstrated, what specific conversations were to leverage these learnings, and then how to implement them in everyday practice. And then finally, this research is going to continue. This isn't a one and done. We're digging deeper, looking at other issues that would benefit from guided language strategy.
Very cool. Well, yeah, in this unprecedented time, I think, when it comes to communication and smoothing everything out in that arena, we'll take all the help we can get.
Absolutely. No help should go unturned right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate being able to talk through these tough situations with you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Cassie, and wish you all the best.
And thank you to CareCredit for sponsoring this edition of Vet2Vet. Check out the Spark section of vetfolio.com for more of our B2B discussions on various topics in veterinary medicine. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.